The smell hit Ben first. It was the thick, sour scent of fear mixed with something else he could not name. He pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the captured ship and listened. His squad had split up to search the vessel after their successful boarding action. They were looking for survivors, weapons, anything useful. Ben moved down the narrow corridor with careful steps. His boots made soft sounds on the floor despite his efforts to stay quiet. The ship belonged to the Corvan Empire, humanity's newest enemy in this sector of space. 3 days ago, this same vessel had attacked a human colony transport. Now it drifted powerless in space, its crew either dead or captured. Ben, you copy? The voice crackled in his earpiece. Copy, Rick. Nothing yet on Deck 7. Same here. This place gives me the creeps. Ben almost smiled. Rick always said that about enemy ships. The man had been through 15 boarding actions and still got nervous walking through alien corridors. It was one of the things Ben liked about his squad leader. Rick never pretended to be fearless. A sound made Ben stop. It was faint, almost like breathing, but not quite right. He followed it to a door that looked different from the others. This one had heavy locks and warning symbols that glowed red in the dim light. Ben checked his weapon and placed his ear against the door. The breathing sound came again, definitely from inside. Ben looked at his scanner. It showed one life form beyond the door, weak but alive. He tried the door controls, but they needed a command code. Ben considered calling for backup, then decided to check first. He pulled out his cutting tool and began working on the lock mechanism. 5 minutes later, the door slid open with a grinding noise. The smell rushed out stronger now, and Ben had to cover his nose. He stepped inside and turned on his light. The room was small and dark. In the center, chained to the floor, sat a figure that made Ben freeze. She was clearly not human, but she was also not Corvan. Her skin was pale blue with silver markings that seemed to glow in his light. Her hair was white as snow and hung in tangled strands around her face. She wore torn clothing that might once have been elegant. Most importantly, she was injured. Dark blood stained her arms and legs where the chains had cut into her skin. When his light hit her, she looked up. Her eyes were large and silver, and they held a mixture of fear and defiance that Ben recognized immediately. He had seen the same look in human prisoners. "Hey," he said softly, holding up one hand to show he was not a threat. "I'm not going to hurt you." She did not respond, but her eyes followed his every movement. Ben took a slow step closer and saw the full extent of her situation. The chains were designed to cause pain. They were too tight and had metal spikes that pressed into her skin. Whoever had put her here wanted her to suffer. Ben felt something hot rise in his chest. He had seen enemy prisoners before. Standard procedure was to secure them, get information if possible, and turn them over to intelligence. But this was different. This was torture, plain and simple. He moved closer, and she shrank back as much as the chains allowed. Ben stopped and crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Look, I know you probably don't understand me," he said in his gentlest voice, "but I want to help. Those chains look painful." She watched him with those silver eyes. After a moment, she spoke. Her voice was soft and musical, but the words were in no language Ben had ever heard. She sounded weak, like she had not had water in a long time. Ben pulled out his water bottle and held it where she could see it. He took a small sip to show it was safe, then held it toward her. She stared at it, then at him. Slowly, she nodded. Ben moved carefully to her side. The chains gave her just enough movement to lift her head. He held the bottle to her lips and let her drink. She drank greedily, and some water spilled down her chin. When she was done, she spoke again in that musical language. She sounded like she was saying thank you. "You're welcome," Ben said. He looked at the chains more closely. They were electronic locks, probably controlled from elsewhere on the ship. But they also had manual releases hidden under panels. Ben had studied Corvan equipment during training. His earpiece crackled. "Ben, report. What's your status?" Ben hesitated. He should call this in. A prisoner this well-guarded might be important. Intelligence would want to interrogate her. But looking at her injuries, he was not sure she would survive much more abuse. "Still searching Deck 7, he said finally. "Found some damaged equipment." Nothing important. Ben felt bad about lying, but something inside him said this was right. He began working on the first chain lock. The alien woman watched him with growing amazement. She said something in her language that sounded like a question. Ben looked up and met her eyes. "I don't know what you're asking, but I'm getting you out of here," he said. "Nobody deserves this." The first lock opened with a soft click. The chain fell away from her wrist and she gasped in relief. Dark blood had caked where the metal had cut her skin. Ben pulled out his basic medical kit and began cleaning the wound. She held perfectly still while he worked, but he could see tears forming in her silver eyes. Not tears of pain, but something else. Ben had seen the look before in rescue operations. It was the expression of someone who had given up hope and suddenly found it again. He moved to the second lock. This one was more stubborn, but Ben was patient. While he worked, he talked to her in low tones. "My name is Ben," he said, pointing to himself. "Ben, I'm with the Human Defense Force. We captured this ship 3 hours ago." She listened to his words even though she could not understand them. When he said his name and pointed to himself, she seemed to get the idea. She pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Zira. "Zira?" Ben repeated. She nodded and almost smiled. "Nice to meet you, Zira." The second lock opened. Zira pulled her arm free and rubbed her wrist carefully. She looked at Ben with something approaching wonder, as if she could not believe what was happening. Ben moved to work on her leg chains. These were the worst. The metal had cut deep and infection was starting to set in. Ben used more medical supplies, cleaning the wounds as best he could. Zira winced but did not pull away. "This is going to hurt," Ben warned, though he knew she did not understand. He applied antibiotic gel to the worst cuts. Zira bit her lip but stayed still. As Ben worked on the final lock, his earpiece crackled again. "All squads, this is Rick. We've got movement on the ship. Looks like some Corvin crew members are still alive and trying to reach the bridge. Squads 2 and 3 move to intercept. Squad 1, finish your sweep and meet us there." Ben's hands moved faster on the lock. If there were still Corvin on the ship, this room would not be safe much longer. The lock clicked open and Zira's legs were finally free. She tried to stand but nearly fell. Ben caught her arm and helped her up. She was weaker than she looked. Ben estimated she had been chained here for days, maybe longer. "Can you walk?" he asked, then realized she would not understand. Instead, he pointed toward the door and took a step. Zira nodded and took a shaky step forward. Her legs were unsteady, but she could move. Ben looked around the cell. There had to be a reason the Corvin had kept her here instead of just killing her. The way she was chained, the care taken to keep her alive but suffering, suggested she was valuable to someone. Zira said something and pointed to herself, then made a gesture with her hands. She touched her head like she was wearing something, then pointed up. Ben frowned, trying to understand. She repeated the gesture, this time more elaborate. She touched her head, straightened her shoulders, and pointed up with a regal bearing that suddenly made everything clear. "Your royalty," Ben breathed. "That's why they kept you alive." Zira seemed to understand his tone, if not his words. She nodded and said something that included the word she had used for her name. Then she pointed at him and spoke in a grateful tone. Before Ben could respond, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the ship. The battle was getting closer. "We need to move," Ben said. He checked his weapon and looked at Zira. She had no protection, no weapon, nothing. Standard procedure said he should restrain her and turn her over to his commanders. She was an enemy alien, possibly a high-value target. But looking at her injuries, at the gratitude in her silver eyes, Ben made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his backup sidearm and offered it to her. Zira stared at the weapon in shock. She looked from the gun to Ben's face, clearly not understanding why he would arm her. Ben took her hand and wrapped her fingers around the grip, then showed her the safety and trigger. "Just in case," he said. "I hope you won't need it." The weapon fire was getting louder. Ben moved to the door and checked the corridor. It was still empty, but not for long. He turned back to Zira and gestured for her to follow. They moved slowly down the corridor. Zira's legs were getting stronger, but she still needed to rest every few steps. Ben kept watch in both directions, his weapon ready. "Ben, where are you?" Rick's voice was tense in his earpiece. "We need backup up here." "On my way," Ben replied. He looked at Zira. He could not take her into a firefight, but he could not leave her here either. The Corvin would kill her if they found her. They reached an intersection. Ben checked his map display. The shuttle bay was to the left, the bridge to the right. His squad needed him at the bridge, but Zira needed to get to safety. Another burst of weapon fire, much closer now. Ben made his choice. He pointed toward the shuttle bay and said, "That way." "There are human ships there. You'll be safe." Zira shook her head. She pointed at Ben, then at herself, then made a gesture that clearly meant together. "No," Ben said firmly. It's too dangerous. I have to help my squad, but Zira grabbed his arm. She looked into his eyes and spoke in her musical language. Ben did not understand the words, but her meaning was clear. She was not going to abandon him after he had saved her. Heavy footsteps echoed from down the corridor. Ben cursed under his breath. The Corvin were coming this way. Move, he whispered, pulling Zira toward the shuttle bay. They ran as fast as her weakened state allowed. Behind them, alien voices shouted in the Corvin language. They reached the shuttle bay just as the first Corvin soldiers appeared in the corridor behind them. Energy bolts flashed past Ben's head. He spun and returned fire while pushing Zira toward the nearest human shuttle. Go, he shouted. Get on the ship. But instead of running for safety, Zira turned and raised the weapon he had given her. Her first shot took down the lead Corvin soldier. Her second scattered the others behind cover. Ben stared at her in amazement. You can fight. More Corvin appeared. Ben and Zira found themselves pinned down behind cargo containers. Energy bolts burned the air around them. Ben spoke into his earpiece. Rick, I'm in the shuttle bay. I've got a situation here. Ben? What kind of situation? We're kind of busy ourselves. Ben looked at Zira, who was reloading her weapon with practiced ease. She definitely knew how to use it. I've got a friendly with me. We need extraction. A friendly? Ben, what the hell are you talking about? Before Ben could answer, Zira grabbed his shoulder and pointed. More Corvin were entering the shuttle bay from another entrance. They were being surrounded. Ben counted the enemy soldiers, at least 12, maybe more. He and Zira had one wounded alien and one human soldier. The odds were not good. There, Ben said, pointing to the closest shuttle. We make a run for it, Zira nodded. They broke cover together, running and firing. Energy bolts filled the air around them. Ben felt heat as one shot passed inches from his head. They were almost to the shuttle when Ben saw the Corvin soldier rising from behind a control panel. The alien's weapon was aimed directly at Zira's back. Ben did not think. He threw himself sideways, pushing Zira out of the way just as the energy bolt fired. The shot meant for her caught Ben in the shoulder instead, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the floor. Pain flooded through his body. His left arm went numb, but he could still move, still fight. He rolled to cover and kept firing with his good arm. Zira was beside him instantly. She dragged him behind the shuttle's landing gear while laying down covering fire with deadly accuracy. Ben had never seen anyone shoot that well under pressure. The shuttle, he gasped. Get inside and call for help. But Zira was not listening. She was examining his wound with gentle hands, her face full of concern. She spoke in her language, words that sounded like questions or maybe curses. I'm okay, Ben said, though he was not sure if that was true. The wound was bleeding heavily, and his vision was starting to blur around the edges. You need to get out of here. Zira shook her head firmly. She helped him to his feet and half-carried him toward the shuttle's entrance. Behind them, the Corvin soldiers were advancing. They made it inside just as Rick's voice crackled through the comm system. All squads, fall back to the shuttles. The ship is about to blow. Repeat, fall back immediately. Ben collapsed into a seat as Zira sealed the shuttle door. Through the small window, he could see her working the controls. She seemed to know what she was doing. The shuttle lifted off just as the Corvin reached the bay. Ben watched the alien ship shrink below them as they flew toward the human fleet. His shoulder was on fire, but he was alive. They were both alive. He looked at Zira, who was piloting the shuttle with expert skill. She glanced back at him, and he saw something in her silver eyes that he had never seen before. It was not gratitude, though that was there too. It was something deeper. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Why did you help me? He asked, knowing she could not understand. But Zira seemed to sense his question. She spoke in her musical language, gesturing first at him, then at herself. Her tone was serious, almost formal. Ben did not understand her words, but somehow he understood her meaning. She was telling him that what he had done for her had changed everything. That his simple act of kindness had shown her something she had never expected to find. As their shuttle approached the human fleet, Ben felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing he saw was Zira's silver eyes watching over him with fierce determination. When he woke up, he was in the medical bay of a human ship. Tubes and wires connected him to various machines. His shoulder was bandaged and mostly numb. A medic was checking his vitals. Good, you're awake, the medic said. You lost a lot of blood, but you'll be fine. The shoulder will take a few weeks to heal properly. Ben tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his body. Where is she? Where is who? The alien I came back with, Zira, is she safe? The medic looked confused. There was an alien woman on your shuttle when you arrived. She's been sitting right there since they brought you in. The medic pointed to a chair beside Ben's bed. Ben turned his head and saw her. Zira sat perfectly still, watching him with those silver eyes. She was clean now, her wounds properly treated and bandaged. Someone had given her a simple gray jumpsuit to wear, but she had not moved from her position beside his bed. She won't leave, the medic continued. The intelligence officers tried to take her for questioning, but she refused to go. She just points at you and shakes her head. It's been 18 hours. Ben looked at Zira. She met his gaze and spoke softly in her musical language. Then she reached out and gently touched his uninjured hand. Why? Ben whispered. But even as he asked the question, he thought he already knew the answer. In saving her, he had done something that went beyond military duty or species loyalty. He had shown her that compassion could exist between enemies. That kindness did not require a reward, and now she was showing him the same thing. As Ben drifted back toward sleep, he felt Zira's hand still resting on his. Whatever happened next, whatever complications arose from his decision to save an enemy alien, he knew one thing for certain: some choices were worth making, regardless of the consequences. 3 days passed before anyone could convince Zira to leave Ben's bedside for more than a few minutes. The medical staff tried everything. They brought translators, offered her better quarters, even had the ship's captain speak with her. Nothing worked. She would simply point at Ben and shake her head firmly. Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's chief medical officer, finally gave up trying to move her. She's not hurting anything, she told Commander Hayes. And honestly, having her here might be helping him recover faster. His vital signs are better when she's in the room. Ben was awake more often now. His shoulder still hurt, but the pain was manageable. What bothered him more was the attention. Officers kept coming to ask him questions about what had happened on the Corvin ship. Each time, Zira would tense up and move closer to his bed. "Soldier," Commander Hayes said during one visit, "we need to discuss your prisoner." "She's not my prisoner, sir," Ben replied carefully. "She was being held captive by the Corvin. I found her chained in a cell. Yes, I read your report. But she's still an unknown alien on a military vessel. Intelligence wants to question her." Ben looked at Zira. She was listening to their conversation with obvious concern, even though she could not understand the words. "Has anyone tried to find out who she is? Where she came from?" "We're working on it. The linguistics team is making progress with her language. We should have basic communication established soon." That evening, Dr. Lisa Chen from the linguistics department arrived with a tablet computer. She was a small woman with kind eyes who spoke in gentle tones. Zira seemed less nervous around her than the military officers. "We've been analyzing recordings of her speech," Dr. Chen explained to Ben. "Her language has similarities to several known alien dialects. We think we can create a basic translation program." Dr. Chen sat down across from Zira and activated her tablet. She spoke slowly in what sounded like a mixture of Zira's musical language and computer-generated tones. Zira's eyes widened in surprise. Zira responded, speaking carefully. The tablet translated her words into text on the screen. Dr. Chen read them aloud. She says, "You understand my words? How is this possible?" Dr. Chen typed a response, and the tablet spoke it in Zira's language. "We are learning. We want to communicate with you." For the next hour, Ben watched as Dr. Chen and Zira worked together to improve the translation system. It was fascinating to see understanding grow between them. Zira was clearly intelligent and learned quickly how to speak more clearly for the computer. Finally, Dr. Chen turned to Ben. "I think we can have a real conversation now. The translation isn't perfect, but it's good enough." Ben looked at Zira. "Ask her why she won't leave." Dr. Chen typed the question. Zira's response appeared on the screen a moment later. She says, "The kind warrior saved my life. I am bound to him by honor until the debt is repaid." "What kind of debt?" Ben asked. Zira's answer was longer this time. Dr. Chen read it slowly. She says, "In my culture, when someone saves your life at risk to their own, you owe them a life debt. But this is more than tradition. This human showed me something I had never seen before. Mercy without expectation of reward. Kindness to an enemy. Such honor is rare in the galaxy." Ben felt uncomfortable with her words. "Tell her she doesn't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do. When Dr. Chen translated his response, Zira shook her head firmly. She spoke rapidly, and the translation scrolled across the screen. She says, "No, not anyone would do this. My own people abandoned me to capture rather than risk political problems. The Corvin tortured me for information. Only this human chose to help when he had nothing to gain and everything to lose." Dr. Chen looked up from her tablet. "Ben, I think you should know something else. We've figured out who she is. Her real name is Princess Zira Valdanesh of the Valdari Empire. She's the daughter of Emperor Kale Valdanesh." Ben stared at Zira in shock. "You're a princess?" Zira nodded sadly. Through the translator, she told them her story. She had been traveling to negotiate a trade agreement when Corvin raiders attacked her ship. Her guards had fled when the battle turned against them. Her advisors had declared her lost rather than mount a rescue operation. "My father received word of my capture 3 days before you found me," the translator voiced her words. "He chose to begin preparations for naming my younger brother as heir, rather than risk a rescue mission. To them I was already dead." Ben felt anger rising in his chest. "Your own people just left you there?" "It was politically convenient," came Zira's translated response. "My death would allow them to declare war on the Corvin without looking weak. A rescue mission would seem desperate." Dr. Chen was taking notes rapidly. This was intelligence gold. A Valdari princess with detailed knowledge of her empire's politics and military capabilities. But Ben was not thinking about intelligence value. He was thinking about a young woman chained in a dark cell, abandoned by everyone who should have protected her. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That's wrong." Zira looked at him with those silver eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft even through the mechanical translation. "This is why I cannot leave your side. You showed me that honor exists in the galaxy, that some beings will do what is right simply because it is right. I have never seen this before." Commander Hayes arrived the next morning with news. "We've made contact with the Valdari Empire. They want their princess back." Ben looked at Zira, who had tensed up at the mention of her people. "What did you tell them?" "That we have her and she's safe. They're sending a diplomatic ship to collect her." "And if she doesn't want to go?" Commander Hayes frowned. "She's a foreign royal. We can't just keep her against her will, but we also can't force someone to return to a government that abandoned them." Dr. Chen arrived with her translation equipment. Through the computer, they asked Zira what she wanted to do. Her answer was immediate and firm. "I do not wish to return to a people who valued my life so little. I request sanctuary among the humans." Commander Hayes looked stunned. "A Valdari princess requesting asylum? Do you understand what you're asking? This could cause a diplomatic incident." "Tell her the consequences," Ben said. "Make sure she understands." Dr. Chen translated the question. Zira's response was lengthy and thoughtful. She says she understands perfectly. She says her people will be angry, but they cannot afford to declare war on humanity over one princess they were willing to sacrifice anyway. She believes this incident could actually lead to better relations between our species. "How so?" Commander Hayes asked. Zira's explanation came through the translator in careful phrases. "My people respect strength above all else. They abandoned me because they thought it showed strength. But Ben's actions show a different kind of strength. Strength to do what is right even when it is difficult. Strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves. This is something my people have forgotten." Over the next few days, the situation grew more complicated. The Valdari diplomatic ship arrived and demanded Zira's return. When they learned she was requesting asylum, they threatened economic sanctions against humanity. But something unexpected happened. News of the incident spread through both fleets. Human soldiers who heard the story were proud of Ben's actions. Valdari crew members on the diplomatic ship began asking questions about why their princess preferred to stay with aliens rather than return home. Ben was finally released from medical care, but Zira still stayed close to him. She had been given quarters near his, but she spent most of her time following him around the ship. The crew found it amusing and started calling her Ben's shadow. "This is ridiculous," Ben told Dr. Chen one day. "She can't spend her whole life following me around." Dr. Chen translated his words. Zira's response made them both laugh. "She says she's not following you around. She's protecting you. Apparently you're terrible at watching out for yourself." It was true that Ben had a habit of getting into dangerous situations. Just that morning, he had volunteered for extra duty helping repair damaged sections of the ship. Zira had insisted on coming along, claiming someone needed to keep him safe. The breakthrough came when Ambassador Maria Santos arrived from Earth. She was a skilled diplomat with experience in first contact situations. More importantly, she understood the cultural implications of what was happening. "Princess Zira," she said through Dr. Chen's translator, "your people are demanding your return, but you're asking for asylum. Before we make any decisions, I need to understand your long-term intentions." Zira's answer was clear and decisive. "I want to serve as a bridge between our peoples. Ben showed me that humans possess a moral strength my people have lost. If I return to the Valdari Empire, I will be married off to some political ally and forgotten. Here I can help both species learn from each other." Ambassador Santos leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "An exchange program. Valdari citizens living among humans to learn your ways. Human citizens visiting Valdari space to share your perspectives. Cultural and scientific cooperation instead of suspicion. And you would lead this program?" "I would be honored to do so, but only if Ben agrees to help me." Everyone looked at Ben. He had been listening to the conversation with growing amazement. "Me? I'm just a soldier." Zira spoke directly to him, her words coming through the translator with unusual clarity. "You are the human who showed me that strength and mercy can exist together, that protecting others is more important than protecting yourself, that doing what is right matters more than following orders. These are the qualities both our species need to learn." Ambassador Santos was taking notes rapidly. This could work. A joint cultural program led by a Valdari princess and the human soldier who saved her. It would be powerful symbolism. But Ben was shaking his head. "I don't know anything about diplomacy or cultural exchange." "You know about treating people with dignity," Zira's translated voice replied. "You know about choosing compassion over convenience. These are the most important diplomatic skills of all." The negotiations took 3 more days. The Valdari Empire was initially furious about losing their princess. But as details of the story spread through their fleet, public opinion began to shift. Many Valdari citizens were disturbed to learn that their royal family had abandoned a princess to torture, rather than attempt a rescue. Emperor Kyle Valdanesh finally agreed to the exchange program, but only if it was presented as Zira's patriotic duty, rather than her personal choice. It allowed him to save face while giving his daughter the freedom she wanted. Ben found himself promoted to Cultural Liaison Specialist, a position that had never existed before. He would work with Zira to develop programs that brought the two species together in peaceful cooperation. "I still don't understand why you chose me," Ben told Zira on their last day aboard the military ship. They were preparing to transfer to a civilian vessel that would take them to the new cultural center being established on the border between human and Valdari space. Zira had been working with Dr. Chen to improve her English. She could now speak directly to Ben without the translator, though her accent was musical and strange. "In my culture, we have a saying," she told him. "The measure of a person is not what they do when others are watching, but what they do when no one will ever know. You saved me when you thought no one would ever find out. You gave me water when you could have left me thirsty. You freed me when keeping me chained would have been easier." Ben looked out the viewport at the stars. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Zira said firmly. "That is why your species is special. You believe anyone would show such kindness, but most would not. Most people in the galaxy choose what is convenient over what is right. Humans choose what is right, then convince themselves it was convenient." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "This is why I cannot leave your side, Ben. Not because of any debt, but because I want to learn how to be more like you, how to choose mercy over politics, how to protect others instead of protecting myself." Ben thought about her words. "And I want to learn from you too. You've seen more of the galaxy than I ever will. You understand things about honor and duty that humans are still figuring out. Then we will learn together," Zira said with a smile, "and perhaps we can teach our peoples to do the same." 6 months later, the Valdari Human Cultural Exchange Program had become a model for interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. Valdari citizens lived in human cities, learning about democracy and individual rights. Human students studied on Valdari worlds, discovering new forms of art and philosophy. Ben and Zira worked together at the program's headquarters, a space station that orbited the border between their territories. They had become friends in the truest sense, partners in building something neither species could have achieved alone. The best part was seeing how their example inspired others. Young Valdari nobles began questioning their culture's harsh traditions. Human soldiers started carrying translation devices so they could communicate with alien civilians they encountered. "You know what's funny?" Ben said one day as they watched a group of human and Valdari children playing together in the station's recreation area. "What?" Zira asked, looking up from the report she was reviewing. "I still don't think I did anything special on that ship. I just couldn't leave you there." Zira set down her tablet and looked at him with those silver eyes that had first held so much fear and pain. Now they sparkled with humor and warmth. "That is exactly why what you did was special," she said. "You saved me without thinking about rewards or consequences. You chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. You showed me that true strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them." She gestured toward the children playing nearby. "Look at them. Valdari and human children playing as friends. This exists because one human soldier decided that doing the right thing was more important than following orders." Ben watched a young Valdari girl help a human boy reach a toy that had rolled under a table. They were speaking in a mixture of both languages, switching back and forth without thinking about it. "We did this together," he said. "Yes," Zira agreed, "but it started with your choice. Your decision to see a person in pain instead of an enemy prisoner. That moment changed everything." As Ben watched the children play, he realized Zira was right. The simple decision to treat another being with compassion had rippled outward, affecting thousands of lives across two civilizations. Sometimes the most important choices were the ones that seemed obvious at the time. Sometimes saving one person could save everyone. And sometimes, the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from turning them into friends. Zira had never left Ben's side, just as she had promised. But now it was not out of obligation or debt. It was because together, they had found something worth building. Something that honored the best qualities of both their species. The alien princess and the human soldier had become partners in creating a better galaxy, one act of kindness at a time.